So the White House confirmed President Trump does not want members of Congress killed.
Did you ever think you would have to read that sentence?
I didn't.
A lot of us didn't. No. So here's what happened. In a Truth Social post, Trump called a group of Democrats traitors and appeared to say their actions can be punishable by prison or death. This example of President Trump's behavior, not the only one that has made headlines recently. Here to break it all down, in a week that started with an insult to a reporter and ended with death threats towards Democrats, is The Hill's White House reporter, Brett Samuels. Good morning, Brett. What a week it has been at the White House. What do you make of some of the remarks? And if you can, explain exactly what the president has said these last couple of days.
Yeah, guys, it's certainly been a rather fractious week, a week of insults and sort of tense moments involving the president. As you guys mentioned, this week started on Sunday with the president flying home on Air Force One from Florida, where he called a reporter piggy because, they were pressing him on the Epstein files issue, which he clearly did not like. The middle of the week saw him snap at another reporter who was pressing him about, the Epstein files and about the death of Jamal Khashoggi during the visit of the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia. And now we're seeing the week end with the White House having to essentially answer whether the president wants to see Democratic lawmakers executed because he had a bit of a social media tirade against them in response to this video where we saw a handful of Democrats, former military members, former intelligence officers, essentially urge members of the military, current members of the military, to resist what they called unlawful orders. So it has been, I think, a very telling week, a very revealing week about kind of President Trump's mindset and his sort of bubbling frustration with the storylines around him.
I was going to ask you about that because we're used to the president being emotive. We're used to the president, peppering his language with a lot of drama and hyperbole. This was all just a little different. This all punched above his regular weight. Is there speculation among watchers and you, Brett, that this is him feeling dented by the elections, by the Epstein files, and other things that are coming up?
Yeah, Hillary, I think that this is a sign that some of these storylines are certainly touching a nerve with the president. We've seen his sort of frustration, particularly when it comes to the Epstein files story. For months, we've seen him essentially say that anybody who's giving oxygen to this story is a dumb Republican, or that it's essentially undercutting his administration's successes. I think his response on Air Force One, where a reporter was pressing him about the Epstein files, and he told them to be quiet, called them piggy, which we should note the White House defended yesterday as an example of frankness and honesty from the president. I think the fact that he responded in that way, in the Oval Office during the visit of the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia. I think these stories are touching a nerve with him. There's certainly a sense of frustration that he can't just move past these stories, that even some Republicans are feeding into these. And maybe a sign that, President Trump's sort of ability to just power through everything and get his way in his second term. It's not quite as clear. It's not quite as clearly that way as maybe we thought it was in his first 6 or 7 months.
Yeah, let's go ahead and listen to Press Secretary Karoline Leavitt sort of explain what the president has been doing on social media and defending the words that he's using.
Encouraging them to defy the president's lawful orders. The sanctity of our military rests on the chain of command. And if that chain of command is broken, it can lead to people getting killed. It can lead to chaos. And that's what these members of Congress who swore an oath to abide by the Constitution are essentially encouraging.
So that was Karoline Leavitt responding to a question about the Truth Social posts that President Trump amplified, calling, what these members of Congress are doing seditious behavior. What is at the root of that sort of spat, Brett? What's going on there?
Yeah, so this traces back to a video that was put out earlier this week by 6 members of Congress, all Democrats, all former military service members or intelligence officials who served the country. Alyssa Slotkin, senator from Michigan, Mark Kelly, senator from Arizona, and a few members of Congress on the House side put out this video essentially telling members of the military that if they're given an unlawful or illegal order, they do not have to follow it. So that was the sort of genesis of the video. They were raising concerns about these strikes on Venezuelan or on drug boats in the Caribbean. They're raising concerns about the deployment of troops in cities across the United States. And this did not sit well with the president. Obviously, we saw him react quite strongly on social media on Thursday, as we saw at the top, accusing them of sedition, of being traitors. He reposted a few people, including one who suggested that George Washington would have these people hanged. So really an escalation of his rhetoric. And we saw Karoline Leavitt obviously take to the podium and defend it and try to turn it around and suggest that the Democrats were the one kind of fueling the tensions here with their initial remarks.
So, Brett, I know my American history, not as well as historians, of course, but I know it pretty well. I can't imagine a time when a president said something like that, calling for the execution of lawmakers. I mean, perhaps the Civil War. Maybe that was the last time. Can you speak to the unprecedentedness of the nature and how people feel about that remark?
Yeah, as you guys mentioned at the top here, it's sort of a stunning moment when the press secretary of the White House has to essentially directly answer a question about whether the president wants lawmakers to be executed. I think just speaks to sort of the uncharted territory we're in. Obviously, President Trump is an unorthodox figure, but this sort of goes beyond sort of the untraditional language he uses when the White House has to be directly refuting, whether he wants lawmakers killed, especially at this moment in time when, political tensions are so high. We've seen examples of political violence spilling out. We've seen members of the White House try to essentially say, that the left is mostly to blame for these cases of political violence. So to see the president, echoing this kind of language and the White House having to defend it or downplay it, I think just speaks to kind of the unprecedented moment or extraordinary moment that we're in. And I think, does not exactly give cause for optimism that tensions or cooler heads are going to prevail anytime soon.
All right, The Hill's White House reporter Brett Samuels. Brett,
thank you, Brett.
Thank you so much for joining us this morning. Have a great weekend.
It.
Of course, you can always catch Brett's stellar reporting at thehill.com.